Welcome, everybody. So glad that you're here with us for our February Ladies Who Lunch. This is going to be a really, I think, tremendous. Um, so there I am. And I'm very excited for a couple of reasons. One is that we have just such a terrific guest, and her name is Abra. She's a horticulturist, and she's also a garden historian. And I first met her, so I'm inviting her now. So you'll give me a little bit of patience with this. It's also our first time with music, and I'm pretty jazzed about it because the musician is my brother, James Popick. So you'll see his um, uh, Bandcamp source there at the bottom of the screen, and we'll have a couple of them. But this first one I'm like especially jazzed about because it's called Southern. And Abra Lee, our guest, is from Atlanta, where she's going to be joining us. But she's in high demand. I mean, she is a celebrity of the horticultural world. I was first introduced to her through Plantorama, which is our Metro Hort group. You know, February is a short month. You know, it's very small, but I think I always say that there's so many holidays in the month. There's President's Week, there's Super Bowl, there's Valentine's Day, and it's Lunar New Year, so you can see some of my tablescape that I've done for that. And it's also Black History Month, so I thought this is just perfect to be able to have Abra join us. When she comes on board, I'm going to read a little bit about her bio. But she's been doing so much traveling. She's in great demand. Not only was she a featured guest speaker at Plantorama in January, but I know she's got a few dates coming up, and I'll post them onto the Ladies Who Lunch Conversations Facebook so you can follow her along. I know I'm going to be joining, I think it's Heritage Farm, it's the University of Virginia. And let me see if I can do this here. We're going to try it again just to be sure. And there's also the Garden Conservancy that she's going to be doing. So she's great. So her book is called Conquering the Soil, and it's going to be coming out next year. So she's going to, hey, there she is. I can see you now. Hold on, folks. Here we go. 1, 2, and then we're going to go live here. So welcome, Abra.
Hi, Leanne.
Haha, look how cute you look. Adorable. And what's the poster in the background?
This is the fabulous floriculture icon, Lucille Kane, and she is one of Harlem, New York's finest. I will say born in Sparta, Georgia, so a Georgia peach like me, but she was a florist there. And in the picture, if you can see it pretty clearly, she was at the Metropolitan Florist Association conference or convention in the late 1940s and won an award for most original, most creative for this hat with 300 orchids in it and 15 Hawaiian orchids at the top. So
I just got goosebumps. I love orchids. I could go, on and on. They're just so exotic, looking. So first I want to say cheers to you, my dear, and thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me. This is such an honor.
Yeah. No, thank you for saying that. It's an honor for me too, for our Ladies Who Lunch. And Abra just confirmed that she got her Ladies Who Lunch fork, so I'm very excited about that. So
it's right here. I did. I love it. It sits on my desk. That means I love it because this is where I spend most of my time. So thank you.
You're more than welcome. It's my pleasure. So I was explaining right before you came on, this is the first time that we have music with the Ladies Who Lunch. And I'm very honored because the musician is my brother, James Popick. And this first song is called Southern. And I thought, perfect for you. It's called Southern.
Thank you.
For those that don't know me, I'm a horticulturist also, and a garden designer and an author. So these are some of my books, and the sort of origins. This is the Hamptons and Long Island Homegrown Cookbook, and The Art of the Garnish, and this is Savoring Gotham. And so when I got the idea, I wrote 3 chapters in that book, and one of them was the Ladies Who Lunch. So it's all about these great, inspiring women in New York, and I dare say, across the country or across the world, where women are doing the work of keeping up a sense of community and culture. And it really inspires us. So that's why I started all of this, especially during the pandemic when people couldn't always be together. And, I believe, like I said to you, that ideas have agency. So we want to be able to share that. And when I saw you at Plantorama, I was just so taken because, I have my certificate from New York Botanic Garden. I worked there. I worked at Brooklyn Botanic Garden. And I love garden history, but I had never been exposed to what your work is. So for those that don't know Abra, let me just read a little bit about her background. So she graduated from Auburn University with a degree in ornamental horticulture. She's worked in a number of horticultural roles at the University of Georgia, a landscape manager for 2 international airports. I have to ask you about that. A municipal arborist in the city of Atlanta. And you've also been a writer and lecturer at the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center. I love her. The Temple University and the Smithsonian Gardens. And your work seeks to break down the barriers that prevent Black people participating in horticulture. And then you founded the social media platform Conquer the Soil, which raises horticultural awareness through Black garden history and current events. So congratulations. That's very impressive. And
Thank you.
Yeah. So my first question is really 2 questions, but the first one is, like many different ethnic groups, they in some ways tried to get away from their ties to the land. They felt that, my mother's family's been in this country many years, but my father's family were immigrant. And I think that people always tried to distance themselves from that because that was so much work, you know what I mean? Like labor work. And so that's like one part of my question. And then the other part is, all of your horticulture work, what prompted you to do this research into the history? Because it's a little bit of a pivot in a way.
To answer your first question, Leanne, it's a yes and is the answer I'm going to give you. So yes, what you are saying is true. You did see Black people, pivoting from the land during the early 1900s and honestly even beyond for multiple reasons. So I bring that up because it really, a lot of this ties back to 2 really iconic figures in Black history, Booker T. Washington and W.B. Du Bois. Washington, very controversial figure, and he is the wizard that created Tuskegee, really deeply pushed industrial education and work with what you have and what the hand that you were dealt. And if this is the land you have, this is your way to economic achievement in America, which is way more simple than it actually is in real life. So I say that to say because Du Bois really pushed intellectualism and the right to vote and civil rights as the way that Black people would achieve and lead. So the reason I said yes and is because it's not a true statement to say that the majority of Black people wanted to leave the land. People migrated from the South to the North for multiple reasons, for better opportunity, for their own safety. So they left their country life down here. And a great example is the woman behind me, Lucille Kane, born in Sparta, Georgia, and then ends up in Harlem, New York, moves there. So a lot of people come from these rural backgrounds and heritages and love the land, but for multiple reasons, had to let it go. What we're seeing now is a renaissance, and Black people feel a real connection to the land. I think many people do. And it is in our culture, a very spiritual connection. So I want to say to people that's very real. They're not imagining how they feel about this connection with Mother Nature. So that's why I said yes.
Can you describe a little bit more like the spiritual connection? I mean, a part of my mother's family's heritage is Lenape Indian. And so I think Native, as part Native American, you can relate to that sense of spirituality at the land, but how does it apply here for Black or African Americans, that spirituality that you talked about?
It's something that is it's in our soul. And I'm gonna bring up Du Bois again, because Conquer the Soil is named. I pulled that those three words were words that Dr. W.B. Du Bois wrote, the first Black man to graduate from Harvard with a PhD, and amongst many other things. Yeah. And I say that to say that he talked about the three gifts that Black people who were enslaved brought to the Americas through the transatlantic slave trade, through the Middle Passage. And that was their gift of story and song, their gift of spirit, and their gift of strength and brawn, which was their ability to conquer the soil. And so when we're talking about those spiritual ties to the soil, it's just this feeling that my really great friend and mentor, Terry Spate, said to me once, that our hands know what to do with the land. You just know it. It is in your blood, it is in your DNA, that definitely trace back to so many of our origins in West Africa as Black people throughout the diaspora, throughout the world. And so that's what I mean by the spirit. It's just something you can't even explain, the joy and the peace and the confidence that you feel when this soil, when that Georgia red clay is in my hands. It does feel like I naturally know what to do with it. So that's what I mean by the spirit. And you're right. Many cultures experience that, including I think you said it was your mom's background as a Native American. So it's very real.
I know I got goose pimples when you were talking about that, because it really, that sense of spirituality and the connection to the land. I think now, in my horticultural world, and I'm sure yours too, but now it's really a sense of power, that comes with that connection, so that you take back the land or your food ways, and growing your own food. And it's a sense of independence, I think, that comes from being in control of, what you eat and what you do, right?
Absolutely. And because you are Ladies Who Lunch, we see a renaissance with women and farmers, and even beyond food.
Yeah. So now tell me, how did you, being in horticulture and knowing all this, and so were you inspired, or what prompted you to say, wait a second, I'm going to go into the garden history and research this, and how did it come about, and then what was the process? Because I'm sure you couldn't just go on the internet and look it up. It didn't really exist so much, did it?
It didn't. So the process was definitely originated through my own mama, who is a trained historian. That is what her background is in education. Her 4 academic degrees are in. And she was the one who would pull books off the shelf and would explain to me that to know this history, this Black garden history, it wasn't just, it was there. Black history isn't hiding, it's actually in front of us, but it may not be in the places that I was expecting. So for instance, I remember learning about Zora Neale Hurston's sister-in-law, Blanche King Hurston, who is a flower farmer and a nursery woman, owned a florist, was believed to be the first Black florist in Florida, definitely in Jacksonville. But her story was in a phenomenal book on people from Jacksonville, Black businessmen and business people and business women from Jacksonville. So it's there. It's just in really tucked away type places. I wasn't expecting to read about a flower farmer in that book. And to give your audience context, Jacksonville, Florida is a place that at one point had the largest population of wealthy Black Americans. And I think another great example that will resonate to New York, I was reading a book on the Harlem Renaissance. And randomly in this book, they're talking about the extraordinary, iconic Langston Hughes. And it mentions how he worked as a truck farmer for a man, a Greek farmer in Staten Island. And then later on, they talk about him being a floral delivery driver for a florist. So Langston Hughes, of all people, really? One of the greatest American poets to ever walk, has this connection to our industry that's real. So that's what I mean. It's in these really sweet and surprising places. And I brought those up, Leanne, is because to learn this and to enjoy it and understand it, because it is our history. It is American history. It's your history too. Yeah. You can't separate it from Black history. And so that's why you'll learn about Black garden history in a Harlem Renaissance book, or in a book on, exceptional Black people from Jacksonville. That's, you just can't separate the two.
Totally agree. And I don't know about you, but I'm someone that I just, cherish learning. I mean, I think if you're a horticulturalist, you have sort of a natural curiosity about things, to be like a scientist, to go out and observe, use all of your senses. But, I almost feel so, gypped in a way, because I love garden history. It was one of my favorite subjects, and I continue to study it. So that's why I was especially taken with this. But I just think this is why you're so inspirational to bring this to all of us. So I have so many questions, so I'll try away. Is there, are you, more focused on teaching young children about it, or adults, or is it everybody, to bring these to the fore? And then when you talk about reading about Jacksonville or Langston Hughes, did you have to comb through and find this, or was it quite apparent to you?
To answer your first question, my biggest audience and my first audience has been women, to, I would say, even enjoy garden clubs, who were the ones that were the first ones to listen to these stories. So, and from there, sharing what they told me word of mouth helped conquer the soil to grow, helped this canon of human interest stories, for lack of better words, that I have to grow. Also with children, I notice now that parents bring their children to my presentations, and that's what I'm obviously we're still in an endemic now, I guess is what it's called, but I was in Louisville this past weekend in a school, I think it was the W.B. Du Bois school in Louisville. I may be saying it wrong, but it's definitely the Du Bois school. Their students showed up, and even one of the employees of Bernheim Arboretum there brought her daughter Solo there. And children are coming and enjoying it. And they were the ones, they didn't necessarily even have questions for me. They had comments, and they wanted to do beautification and do floriculture. And they felt like, yeah, I knew I wasn't imagining how I felt about myself. I knew I had this greatness in me to do this horticultural work. So children is an audience that is a pleasant surprise to me that I wasn't necessarily expecting. And
I think that most everyone wants to know their stories. They want to know about their heritage. They want to know because it provides context for their own lives. And I see a hunger, in people who don't know. I think that's what all this ancestry and, all those kind of things.com and all that. But I think especially in children, because it gives them that sense of confidence that they will need to embrace this and to study it more themselves. So do you think, your book, like I said, it's going to come out next year. It's called Conquer the Soil. Hopefully we'll have you back. You can talk about it, and maybe we can do a giveaway as an autographed copy. But there's 45 hidden figures of horticulture. That is just extraordinary to me. And how did you come to the 45? Was it, did you have a number in your head, or did your editor say, okay, that's enough? Or do you think there's so many more out there?
Oh, well, for the number, I definitely think that was a business decision by Timber Press. There are so many more out there. Those were just, I think you just get to a point, you just have to pick someone. Mm-hmm. And so many of the stories are so rich, and so they just feel your spirit. That's how we came to the 45. However, I know way more stories than that.
Yeah. I love that there's this mix of women and men also, which is pretty unusual in a lot of the garden history. I know for myself, I contributed to the cultural history, the landscape that they did, and that's the story for another day. But I had to do so much research. That was pre-internet. So I was looking in old books and old garden books, and like you talk about the garden clubs, and it was so laborious to be able to do that kind of research. So how did
Yeah.
you spend your time, in the books or online or?
I spent my time in books, in libraries, in archives, online sometimes. But certainly the biggest help for me was word of mouth, and these
Mm.
elders, these mostly women, remembering people from their little towns and wherever they lived, many of them southern towns, because I live in the South, and telling me about someone they remembered, and then me following up on that and learning this magnificent story about the person. So that was people just, you can't get past them being the best resource for me to learn this on my journey, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
I love it. The oral history makes it even nicer, I think, and more authentic. I saw this. My father went to Cornell University, so I was struck with this David August Williston. So of course, my father has passed on to the next garden in the sky. But can you tell us a little bit about David August Williston? And he was the first African American landscape architect, a student of Liberty Hyde Bailey, and the designer of the Tuskegee University campus. And I just have to put in something here too for you. It's just, when I was at Sony, we brought in the Tuskegee Airmen for one of our employee talks, and that was like a huge thing. I still have their autographs, which is like unbelievable to me.
That is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yes, so it's actually David Augustus Williston, and I've probably even said his name August, but that's what's on his birth certificate. So, but nevertheless, I just wanted to, we always got fact checkers out there. So, yes, this man is born into, the way that it's worded is the black bourgeois, meaning that talented 10% that Du Bois references that will lead the community. And he's born in North Carolina. Very successful siblings. Definitely, he remembers having this flower garden when he's a child, makes his way to Cornell, is a student, as you mentioned, of Liberty Hyde Bailey, and is brought on to Tuskegee under the presidency of Booker T. Washington. He works with George Washington Carver, who ends up being a lifelong friend of his and mentor. And he doesn't just lay out the campus of Tuskegee. He does that with Robert Taylor, the first Black landscape architect. He lays out parts of Atlanta University. He lays out parts of Fisk University, parts of Florida A&M University, parts of Howard University. And I bring these schools up because they are what we call HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities. And this man wasn't just a brilliant landscape architect, he was a brilliant businessman. And so when I was talking about archives, to read letters that he wrote and to have my fingers run across his signature, it's just amazing. It does give me chills, and it just makes you feel like you're living in your purpose. And you're like, I can't believe that David Augustus Williston wrote this letter and it's in my hands. So that's always been incredibly exciting. And he lived into his 90s. I mean, his impact, again, to me, is beyond his design impact. It's just his business savvy. It's his, he was a fan of Du Bois, and he worked at Washington. So his real deep understanding of these two both men, and their impact, not just in the United States, but on American horticulture and the people that they influence. So that's, I want to say this to your audience, because I teach this semester Black garden history class at Auburn. When I have time for a class, if I get down to Alabama early enough, Atlanta, where I live, is an hour and a half from Auburn. You make a right, you're headed to Auburn, and you make a left on the exit, you're headed to Tuskegee. So Auburn and Tuskegee are on the same road. So it does feel you to make that left and go to Tuskegee and see the oaks where Booker T. Washington was, and that Williston laid out the landscape, and Carver was there. And I've been to the Tuskegee Airmen Field, and you feel that in real time, Leanne. You do. You can't not feel it.
You can't not. That goes back to your spirituality point, I think, which is so exciting. So coming up for the year ahead, you, besides your teaching and so on, and you have so many speaking, I know you're going to give me your dates so that we can post them here. on the Ladies Who Lunch Conversations Facebook, so people can either buy their tickets or tune in or whatever. So those are going to be more like tutorial. Like here, I wanted to have you on not only to talk about your upcoming book, but because you're so inspirational, I think you're a guiding light for others who may seek to find their own roots or to add on to what the kind of work that you're doing, because I think we all, that saying where like you do your work on the shoulders of others. So it's inspirational. So I love that you said it was from your own mother and, doing, the work that goes with it. But if you have some tips or guidance for, the ladies and viewers who watch, do you have a couple of things that you might suggest to them? I mean, I'm sure it was challenging for you at different points where people said, you're not going to find that, or I don't got that.
I do. The first one is, it is okay to continue to reinvent yourself. You don't have to just stay in the same lane in horticulture. So I grew up going to our rural family farm in Barnesville, Georgia. And my home in Atlanta was 2 acres of trees. And I grew up by a park. So at one time, I was a parks arborist. My dad was director of parks for the city of Atlanta when I was a child. And then I still deeply love trees. And then I began to love flowers and a deep love for not just southern landscapes, southern rural landscapes. And then I became enamored by the people. And all these reinventions, these pivots have been the patches of the quilt that have formed my career in horticulture. So it is okay to be like, to just kind of float around like a little butterfly to your interests, because they're gonna all add up and make sense and help you to, if you're not doing it for a profession, create the garden that you want. And if you are doing it as a profession like you and I, it helps you really find your voice. So that would be my advice. And if you just like that one thing, if you're just like, I'm a rose girl, I'm a rosarian, do that. It's okay. And
like you take off like your little butterfly wings. You can go in different directions. And I think, especially with horticulture, like it's a prism. Like you can see. I often said this before in my own book talks, but like horticulture is a prism that you can see food, politics, and health and wellness and beauty and art and so on. So there's a lot on that spectrum that you can work with.
It's true. I didn't imagine that horticulture would take me from Barnesville, Georgia to Atlanta to Auburn University. That wasn't my plan to be there, to airports in Atlanta and in Houston, Texas, and then on to Longwood Gardens in Kennett Square, Pennsylvania. And Longwood sent me to Château de Villandry in France. So horticulture has been this long arc for me, and it's not even over. I'm still in it. What they say, too young to quit, too old to start over. So that's where I am in my horticulture journey. But it can take you to all the places you dreamed of going. I think that I really just thought I was just going to be a landscaper, and that is a respectable profession. Let me be very clear. I just didn't see myself getting outside of my local area. I didn't know that it would be this window to the world for me and help me have an international career in it. So it is whatever you make it to be. There really are no limits on our ceiling in this, in gardening and in plants.
I agree. It's so magical. And look, I got to meet someone like you who is so inspiring.
Same.
Yes.
Same with you. I feel the same way.
Thank you, Dawn. So thank you. So we have just a few more minutes left. I told you it was going to go so fast. So I could keep talking to you. That's like the one thing we do miss, being live, but we're lucky we have you this way. But you have a fascinator you told me about. You're going to show it, or?
Absolutely, I'm going to show it. So I just want to be, I want to say I had the most epic weekend in Louisville, Kentucky. This is amazing. I just want and there's a butterfly on there. I don't know if the audience can see that, but so we know Louisville, they're known for Muhammad Ali, the greatest of all time, and the Louisville Cardinal, the basketball team, the school there, KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken, Colonel Sanders, bourbon, and of course, their horses.
Bourbon.
Of course. And so I had a speaking engagement at the Waterfront Botanical Garden, and the team there treated me so. I had the most epic weekend in Louisville. I kid you not. So, um, one of the wonderful things they gifted me with was this fascinator when I
Oh,
was done with my speaking engagement, and I can't get over how pretty it is. And just like my ladies who lunch beautiful fork you gave me, now my fascinator sits on my desk. So I
oh,
cannot wait to have lunch with you in real life and bring it old school Leanne in a hat
yeah,
box on
yeah,
my plane with my gloves
yeah.
through
I
the
can't
airport.
wait either. It's just like so. It's so gorgeous. I can't wait to see it on you. It's so fashionable. So I have so sort of a lightning round, I guess. But speaking of Lou in Kentucky, so obviously I wrote a book about cocktails, so I have to ask you, what's your favorite cocktail?
I'm a prosecco champagne girl. I used to hang out with a bunch of Europeans when I was living in Texas, from France and Denmark and Greece and all these wonderful places, and they were about that champagne life. So I like my bubbly.
I love that. Me too. That's what I'm drinking here. So it's always time to celebrate. And I'm going to have an announcement to make, but soon, not here, but about the different ladies who lunch and their favorite cocktails. But also, now my next question is, and that's lightning round, do you have a favorite horticultural app that you use, or do you use any apps on your phone for the plants?
I don't I don't use any apps for the plants on my phone anymore. So I can't say that I have a favorite horticultural app.
What's your book that you're reading, or a favorite book that you would recommend?
Wow. The last book that I read was for my class at Auburn University, and that book was Up from Slavery, the autobiography of Booker T. Washington. So that was it really it's interesting because online you'll see this condensed story of him, right? Maybe 500 words, but when you read the book, you understand his perspective. And I always saw him as this controversial figure, which he is. However, you also understand this is a man literally born into slavery and came from that to where he got, and how he built Tuskegee as a graduate of Hampton, the HBCU. So it helped me to better understand his thinking. So that was the last book I read, and I'm glad I read it because it also helped me gain a lot of perspective about
Yeah.
his life.
I'm going to put that on my list. In no small part, sort of motivated by Black History Month, but I'm reading James Baldwin now. So, I hadn't read him before, but what is this one? Tell me about the train coming. So I'm reading that one.
Okay.
Yeah, which is great. So, I think these holidays and times sort of help us focus things and bring issues and opportunities to the forefront for all of us to enjoy. So, I have one last question before we go, because we're running a little over time. But I was looking for your book cover. Do you have a cover yet? Because I know I did the pre-order, and everyone can do that too. You can do that on Amazon or your local, wherever you buy your books. But have you decided on a cover?
We have not decided on a cover yet. Timber Press has certainly, I definitely was inspired by Gladiola Garden, the children's nature poetry book written by Harlem Renaissance writer Effie Lee Newsom. And I'll tell you, I was inspired for my cover for that because she had Lois Maylou Jones, a Black woman, who is also part of the Harlem Renaissance from Boston, draw the illustrations for her books. I wanted a Black illustrator to honor Effie Lee Newsom and how these two Black women created this beautiful work of art. So we don't have a cover yet, but it will be inspired by that. And I don't mean we're copying the look as much as I'm following that playbook to really have this cultural rich thread in that book with the writer and the artist, the illustrator rather.
I understand. That is just fantastic. So, Abra, I can't thank you enough. I mean, like I said, you're so inspirational, but you're such a thought leader. And what a destiny you have that you're fulfilling and teaching all of us so very much. So I know this won't be our last conversation, and I look forward to the next. So, any parting words or thoughts before we go?
Um, just I think living your purpose And
I think that's very good for living your purpose.
yeah.
Yeah. So thank you very much, and good luck. We'll get the dates from you for all of your upcoming speaking engagements, and we'll share them with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leanne. I really enjoyed it. Thank you, ladies.
Bye bye.